All right, hey, Shalom. I want to begin by giving all glory and praises to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rachakwadash. Double honors to our elders and apostles of Great Millstone. Shalom to the hopefully elect, and Shalom to all the Akim pushing this truth with sincerity. It's your brother Itazawan from the GMS Columbus branch, coming back again with another video through the Spirit. Lord's will it be edifying. And today, through the Spirit, I just wanted to touch on Acts the 7th chapter concerning, Stephen, okay, a follower after the Hamashiach, all right, or after Hamashiach, the anointed Yahweh Shai, okay, and was just rereading over this chapter through the Spirit, and continuing on this series, pretty much connecting ancient times to now, okay, and really keying in on men's great deal of faith, all right, struggles and persecution that they had to suffer while following after the anointed, while following after Yahweh Shai, okay, which will now be translated into this modern day concerning us, men of the Lord, who are following after Yahweh Shai as before, okay? So it's vital that we go into these accounts once more. We dive into these chapters. We constantly read and study and build up our faith and our testimony, okay? Like I said, just reminiscing and going into these accounts and applying them to our walk, okay? Let's get a precept real quick. What's it in Psalms days old? Let me see if I can find this precept. Remember the days of old. Gone. This is Psalms 143:5. It reads, I remember the days of old. I meditate on all thy works. I muse on the work of thy hands. Let's look up that word, muse. I'm going to go back to that word later. To reflect, ponder, meditate, to be absorbed in thought. You see, one more time. Psalms 143:5. It says, I remember the days of old. I meditate on all thy works. I muse on the work of thy hands. You see, so I ponder on the work of thy hands concerning, the things that Yahweh Bahasham and Yahweh Shai has gotten us through, in times of old, and Abaratazah, in times to come. You see, so we are to remember the days of old, remember, the accounts, all right, different scenarios that men of the Lord went through, and through the Spirit apply them to our walk, okay? So let's tap into Acts the 7th chapter through the Spirit. We're going to get some precepts and call it that. But pretty much just a quick overview of this chapter, which it primarily starts in Acts the 6th chapter. You go into it. Let's just read Acts the 6th chapter. It's a short chapter. And then we're going to just jump through 7 and read down to the last portion of the chapter, concerning the stoning of Stephen, okay? And like I said, just going over this chapter, or these chapters, because, this is something that we have to remember. We have to count the costs concerning these things and understand, what comes with serving Yahweh Bahasham and Yahweh Shai. So let's read Acts 6. I'm going to go A and P. Starting at verses 1. It says, now about this time, when the number of disciples was increasing, a complaint was made by the Hellenists, Greek-speaking Jews. So he's going to show you, how we always go into those Gentiles ultimately spoken about in the New Testament. Majority of the time we're speaking of Israelites who are in a Greekish state or Greekish fashion. You see? It says native Hebrews, because their widows were being overlooked in the daily serving of food. So the 12 called the disciples together and said, It is not appropriate for us to neglect teaching the word of the Most High in order to serve tables and manage the distribution of food. Therefore, brothers, choose from among you 7 men with good reputations, men of godly character and moral integrity, full of the Spirit and of wisdom, whom we may put in charge of this task. But we will continue to devote ourselves steadfastly to prayer and to the ministry of the word. The suggestion pleased the whole congregation, and selected Stephen, see, a man full of faith in Hamashiach Yahushai, and filled with and led by the Holy Spirit, and Philip, Prochorus, Nicanor, Timon, Parmenas, and Nicholas, a proselyte, Gentile convert from Antioch. They brought these men before the apostles, and after praying, they laid their hands on them to dedicate and commission them for this service. And this is a beautiful chapter, just going to show you order, and how pretty much these men, sacrificed their livelihood, their lives towards the ministry, okay, and dedicated themselves, their time, body, etc., to serving Yahweh Bahashim and Yahushai. Okay, and also that, there are different portions of the body. All right. We say that they're fitly joined together. Okay. You have men in this ministry who play different roles, but it's all towards the edifying and the support of the ministry. Verses 7, it reads, "And the message of the Most High kept on growing and spreading, and the number of disciples continued to increase greatly in Jerusalem, and a large number of the priests were becoming obedient to the faith, accepting Yahushua as Messiah and acknowledging him as the source of eternal salvation." Verses 8, "Now Stephen, full of grace, divine blessing, favor, and power, was doing great wonders and signs, attesting miracles among the people. However, some men from what was called the synagogue of freedom or freedmen, free Jewish slaves, both Cyrenians and Alexandrians, and some from Cilicia, in the province of Asia, rose up and questioned and argued with Stephen," right? So you had, again, Israelites scattered in these different lands, okay? Real quick, let's just pull a couple of these up for edification's sake of the freedmen. One who has been liberated from slavery, a freedman, or the son of a freedman. Libertine denotes Jews, according to Phileo, who had been made captives of the Roman under Pompey, but were afterwards set free, and who, although they had fixed their abode in Rome, had built at their own expense a synagogue at Jerusalem, which they frequented when in the city. The lame libertines adhered to them to distinguish them from free-born Jews who had subsequently taken up their residence at Rome. Evidence seems to have been discovered at the existing of a synagogue of the Libertines at Pompeii. So just a little quick history concerning who these people were. All right, again, these were ultimately Jews who were freed, okay? And just some history on that, all right? Lord's will through the Spirit can go into this further concerning these men, or this different, group of people. Let's go to Cyrenians, a native of Cyrene. Real quick, let's pull it up. Shishalakia. See if we could get a map on this. Let's go here. Cyrene, an ancient Greek city in North Africa near the coast of Cyrenaica. All right. Let's pull it up in the maps so we get an understanding where it's at. Like it says North Africa. Okay. Suggesting close to Egypt, around that area. Or right off the Mediterranean Sea. Okay. I don't know why I ain't getting a good map. All right. Boom. And when you understand the map, pretty much, oh man, I wish I had like a marker. But let's look up Rome. Submarine of Rome. Let's see what this does. Let's do this. So you understand, ultimately, Rome, this was pretty much what consists of the Roman Empire. So you see how it had parts of would it be modern day Turkey, etc. I believe here you got the Aegean Sea. All right. Which, would be Asia Minor, so on and so forth. You go further south, southwest, you got Israel, so on and so forth. And they have provinces everywhere. Okay. Let's jump back. And then Alexandria. So you understand ultimately where these Jews, okay, native of residents of Alexandria in Egypt, all right, which ultimately was taken by, I believe, Alexander the Great, which hence the name Alexandria in Egypt when he was on his conquest. Yep. See, the chief port of Egypt, population is 4,084,700, founded in 332 BC by Alexander the Great. It was a major center of Hellenistic culture, renowned for its library and for the Pharaoh's lighthouse. All right. And let's see if we could get a map on that. Just so that's one thing I like to do when you going into these different places, etc. It's good to pull maps. Oh shit, like it. Pull maps and understand where these places were, so you get a general idea and gain more understanding. All right. Concerning these biblical places, okay, and how they ultimately tie into history today, secular history, so on and so forth. Let's see what we get. Let's go to map. See, you got Egypt to the further right, further west from that. Let's see if we get an ancient map. Yep. I just want a simple map, man. Let's see what this says. Yep. That's a good one. It's decent. But anyways, just a general idea. Okay, let me see this one. Cool. Close to Cyrene, further west, I believe, of Cyrene. All right. So let's read verses 9 one more time, and we're going to continue. It says, however, some men from what was called the synagogue of the freedmen, freed Jewish slaves, you see? So that's who the freedmen were. All right, the freedmen were freed Jewish slaves. All right, who ultimately come from being captives. All right, one more time. One who was one who has been liberated from slavery, a freedman, or the son of a freedman, or like I said, come from freedmen. All right. They come from different family lines who were captives, under Pompey. Libertine denotes Jews, according to Philo, who had been made captives of the Romans under Pompey, but were afterwards set free, and who, although they had fixed their abode in Rome, had built at their own expense a synagogue at Jerusalem, which they frequented. I hope I'm saying that right. It says, when in that city, Salakia, the name Libertines adhered to them to distinguish them from freeborn Jews. See, so it was pretty much they were called the freedmen to distinguish themselves. All right, from the freeborn slaves, or Salakia freeborn Jews, and those who come from families who were slaves under Pompey. All right. It reads, Libertines adhered to them to distinguish them from freeborn Jews who had subsequently taken up their residence at Rome. Evidence seems to have been discovered of the existence of a synagogue of the Libertines at Pompeii. And I will go into some history of that, but I'm going to just continue on. But I like to bring that stuff out through the spirit. So Jake gets an idea where these places were, what was happening, who these people were, and just gain further understanding of what you're reading, so you understand what you're reading. All right, you have to go into these things, go into these definitions, these words, these places, these maps, etc. Okay, it says, however, some men from what was called the synagogue of freedmen, freed Jewish slaves, both Cyrenians and Alexandrians, and some from Cilicia and the province of Asia, rose up and questioned and argued with Stephen. Right, so you had these Jews from these different regions and backgrounds who came up against Stephen, but they were not able to successfully withstand and cope with the wisdom and the intelligence and the power and inspiration of the Spirit by whom he was speaking. Right, so ultimately they were going at it in the Spirit, going into different doctrines, etc. Because what you got to understand concerning Yahweh Shai, a lot of Jews didn't accept Yahweh Shai as the Messiah. Okay, a lot of them still believed in the Mosaic law. There were different sects, etc. Radical groups like the Sicarii, so on and so forth. The Sadducees and Pharisees. You had all this stuff going on all at once, just like you do now. All these different people who base their faith upon the scriptures, etc., but have different doctrines, so on and so forth. Verse 11, then to attack him another way, they secretly instructed men to say, we have heard this man Stephen speaking blasphemous, slanderous, sacrilegious, abusive words against Moses and against the Most High. You see? All right. So they were, keyed in and focused on the customs of their forefathers, or concerning, things of the Old Testament. I'll just put it like that. Verses 12, that's the Spirit 144. It says, and they provoked and incited the people, as well as the elders and the scribes, and they came up to Stephen and seized him and brought him before the council, the Sanhedrin, Jewish high court, or Jew high court. They presented false witnesses who said this man never stopped speaking against this holy place and the law of Moses. For we have heard him say that Yahweh Shai the Nazarene will tear down this place and will change the traditions and customs which Moses handed down to us. Then all those who were sitting in the council stared intently at him, and they saw that Stephen's face was like the face of an angel. Right. So just going into it, they pretty much lied on the behalf of Stephen. Okay. Lied on him, accused him, persecuted him, spoke falsely against him, etc. Because, they were cut. Okay. And we go into Acts the 7th chapter, is just going to plainly say that, you see. But this is another way connecting ancient times to now concerning concerning what will happen to the prophets ultimately in this day and age. You're gonna have deep fakes. This goes into all that, the deep fakes, the AI. You got the AI to where, they can use your voice box, et cetera and et cetera, to throw salt on your name, okay? Give you a bad rap, in the world. All right. It's going to be a lot of lies. You're going to have family members who falsely accuse you, all right, and give you up to the higher ups, the governments, et cetera. You see? So, like I said, like manner, these things happen once before. All right. Let's jump to Acts the 7th chapter. And pretty much when you start from the first verse down to the roughly the 40th verse, let's say, on down, it's a good read because, it goes into, pretty much, I believe, Stephen's rebuttal, all right, concerning some history, all right, of the nation of Israel, beginning with Abraham, one of our forefathers, on down, okay? But let's read the first verse or the first couple verses, and then we're going to jump down. AMP, Acts 7 AMP at the top. Now the high priest asked Stephen, "Are these charges true?" And he answered, "Brothers and fathers, listen to me. The Most High, or the God of glory, the Shekinah, Shalakia, the radiance of the Most High appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran." Right. So, yeah, that's beautiful. Spirit, one of the beloved elders, I'm not for sure, it's the Elder Ariella in Dallas, or the Elder Yashawamba. But they always look to blame the elect. Okay? It's all the Spirit. So pretty much you go into it, like I said, Stephen just gives some overview concerning, the time of Abraham all the way down to, I believe, David and Solomon, so on and so forth. And pretty much the history of Israel, man. Okay? And once you get to the conclusion of that his statement, a response to the higher ups, the high court, the Sanhedrin, this is what it led to. All right, Acts 7 and 48. It says, "However, the Most High, the one infinitely exalted above humanity, does not dwell in houses made by human hands. As the prophet Isaiah says, 'Heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool for my feet. What kind of house will you build for me, says Yahweh, or what place is there for my rest? Was it not my hand that made all these things? You stiff-necked and stubborn people, uncircumcised in heart and ears, you are always actively resisting the Holy Spirit. You are doing just as your fathers did. Which one of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? They killed those who proclaimed beforehand and coming of the righteous one, whose betrayers and murderers you have now become." Right. And see, that's the thing, the people of our nation are falling right back into that lot. All right. The same spirits ultimately that killed the prophets aforetime. Okay. All right. Like the scriptures say concerning Yahweh Shai. Salakia. Concerning Yahweh Shai, what did they say? Let the blood fall upon us and our children. Okay. Reading on, verse 53, and P, you who received the law as ordained and delivered to you by angels, and yet you did not obey it. Now when they heard this accusation, you see, so like I said, this was all in Stephen's response. Okay. This is what he had to say concerning, concerning the charges that were brought up against him. He pretty much, in a sense, cursed their ass out, let them have it, and we know he had to say it with great passion, all right, through the Spirit, all right, and in great boldness, because what? It goes to say this, verses 54, now when they heard this accusation and understood its implication, they were cut to the heart. You see? Whew. It said they were cut to the heart, and they began grinding their teeth in rage at him. But he, being full of the Holy Spirit and led by him, gazed into heaven and saw the glory, the great splendor and majesty of the Most High, and Yahushua standing at the right hand of the Most High. And he said, look, I see the heavens open up and welcome, and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of the Most High. Right. So after his statement, man, they were cut. All those who came against them, they were cut. You see, and that's, what's happening now, too, through the Spirit. All right. You got a lot of guys who are leaving the Hebrew Israelites. They're offended. The Elder Manasseh Takba in South Carolina, he did a video and has been doing various videos, man. I mean, I want to say for like damn near every day for the last month concerning those of our own kindred coming against us, the Hebrew Israelites. All right. And, they're mad. And, all right. And these going to be the same people who are going to give us up to Esau Edom, who knows the corners, the blocks we're on. Some have been ex-followers, okay, who have been amongst us, who ultimately, unfortunately know where we live, or maybe even know some of our family, who are going to ultimately, side with the devil, all right, in our persecution, you see. But going into it further, at this point, Stephen, gazed into heaven. The Lord showed him, pretty much the heavens. All right, I believe it was the third heaven. Okay. And he's seen visions of, the Heavenly Father and his Son. All right. Verses 57, it says, but they shouted with loud voices and covered their ears, and together rushed at him, considering him guilty of blasphemy. Then they drove him out of the city and began stoning him. And witnesses placed their outer robes at the feet of a young man named Saul. They continued stoning Stephen as he called on the Lord and said, Lord Yahushua, receive and accept and welcome my spirit, man. And man, I was just reading this earlier, and it just had me in a very in an emotional state, almost brought to tears when you just close your eyes and envision this situation that this man was going through, being chased out the city, being stoned, they hitting his back, hitting his legs, his thighs, and this is a major crowd all against one man, and this is the statement that he had to say, understanding that ultimately he knew he was gonna die. He said they continued stoning Stephen as he called on the Lord and said, Lord Yahushua, receive and accept and welcome my spirit. Man, that's a heavy, heavy statement, man. Verses 60. Then just and you got to really visualize what's going on here. It says, then falling on his knees in worship, he cried out loudly. So, he's probably just through in pain, agony, rocks hitting him in his head, probably getting dizzy and going unconscious, and, his shit hurting. He just falls to his knees at that point. Then falling on his knees in worship, he cried out loudly, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. Do not charge them. When he had said this, he fell asleep in death. See? Just man, a beautiful, beautiful passage. A passage to meditate on and to ponder upon. Okay? A man who was ultimately a martyr. for Yahweh Shai's sake. I had that word martyr pulled up earlier. I was going into it. But let's read it. Martyr in the etymon. It says, one who bears testimony to faith, especially one who willingly suffers death rather than surrender his or her religious faith. Specifically, one of the Christians who in former times were put to death because they would not renounce their beliefs, all right, etc. Which we know ultimately those Christians were Israelites, those who followed after the anointed Hamashiachim, all right. See, put to death as punishment for adherence to some religious belief, etc. All right. And real quick, I just want to see something. See if we could pull anything else out about Stephen. Beautiful passage, man. One of those passages, man, that just have you thinking. Stephen crowned one of the 7 deacons in Jerusalem at the first Christian martyr. See? Not that Stephen. Anyways, proto-martyr and Christian saint Stephen is traditionally venerated as the pro-martyr. I wonder what this means. Or first martyr of Christianity. According to the Acts of the Apostles, he was a deacon in early church at Jerusalem who angered members of various synagogues by his teachings. Accused of blasphemy at his trial, he had a speech denouncing the Jewish authorities who were sitting in judgment on him and was then stoned to death. All right. So what date of birth was 5 AD, I believe. Date of death 34 AD, if I'm not mistaken. Via stoning. You see, and this is the lot, all right, of the prophets. Now, will we all die? No. But we do understand and have to understand as individuals, as men who are pursuing after the anointed, this may very well befall us. Okay? This is Hebrews, the 11th chapter. I'm going to go A and P. Starting at 36. Well, I'm going to start at 35. Woman receives it's a beautiful chapter, Hebrews 11. Just going into acts of faith, and great men who show forth that attribute. Let's start at 33. This is who by faith, that is, with an enduring trust in the Most High and his promises, subdued kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promised blessings, closed the mouth of lions. Who was this? Samson, yep. David, Samuel, yep. Khan. Verse 34, extinguished the power of raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword of weakness, were made strong, became mighty and unbeatable in battle, putting enemy forces to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection, and others were tortured to death, refusing to accept release offered on the condition of denying their faith, so that they would be resurrected into a better life. And others experienced the trial of mocking and scourging, amid torture, and even chains of an imprisonment. They were stoned to death, right? Men who followed after Yahweh Bahashim Yahushai. For some of those men, this was their lot. This is what they had befell upon them. They were stoned to death. They were sawn in two. They were lured with tempting offers to renounce their faith, They were put to death by the sword. They went about wrapped in the skins of sheep and goats, utterly destitute, oppressed, cruelly treated, people of whom the world was not worthy, wandering in deserts and mountains, and living in caves and holes in the ground. And all of these, though they gained divine approval through their faith, did not receive the fulfillment of what was promised, because the Most High had us in mind and had something better for us, so that these men and women of authentic faith, would not be made perfect, that is completed in Him apart from us, right? Because ultimately, these things will come in the ladder, okay? These things will come in the ladder. Let's go KJV, starting at 39. And it says, and these all have obtained a good report through faith. See, receive not the promise, the Most High having provided some better thing for us. See, that they without us should not be made perfect. Plain. All right. So I'm going to call it that through the Spirit. Lord's will, continuing this series. And Lord's will, this is edifying to those who may receive it. We give all glory and praise to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rakakwadash. Shalom.